In the late 1800s, Nellie Bly, a female journalist for the New York World newspaper, got herself admitted into Blackwell's Island Asylum to expose unfair and brutal treatment of the women living there against their will. She took a stand for those women by writing a collection of articles about her experiences, which contributed massively to the reformation of the asylum. Bly wanted to get a job at the New York World newspaper, and if her story got good publicity, it would secure her the position. Adversarial journalism was new at the time, and there weren't many women going undercover to expose ugly truths about society. Not many people heard much about the asylum because it was cut off from the mainland, but the rumors that did leak out were extremely terrible. Other men and women's asylums at the time in both America and Europe were similar to Blackwell's. Little was known about mental illness, even by reformers and doctors, and people with illnesses were considered dangerous to society. In medieval times, where views on disabilities originate, causes were believed to be demonic possession, witchcraft, mass hysteria, depression, or stress. They were commonly linked to the devil. In order to get admitted to the asylum, Bly checked into a boarding house for women and pretended to have lost her memory. She gave faraway stares and was saying that everyone else in the house scared her because they were crazy. Bly had this to say about her trial. Criminals are given every chance to prove their innocence. These poor, overworked women are convicted after a few trifling questions. The questions Bly was asked were about where she was from, her financial situation, her family, if she had been taking any drugs, and if anything ailed her. She provided answers that she thought an amnesia victim would give. After Bly's trial, the New York Times reported on Bly's appearance when being admitted to the asylum, saying that her face was almost haggard in its paleness and there was a wild, hunted look in her eyes. The medical examiner at her trial diagnosed Bly with dementia with delusions of persecution and ordered her into Blackwell's Island Asylum. Bly was taken on a ferry to Blackwell's Island with other women ordered into the asylum. On the ferry, Bly asked one patient, Miss Tilly Mayard, if she was in fact crazy, and Mayard said no, but as we have been sent here, we will have to be quiet until we can find some means of escape. Another woman who Bly met was German and spoke little English, so no one could understand her. Because of that, she didn't even get a chance to plead her case. The same happened to a feverish French woman, Josephine Despereaux. Her entire family was in France and could not visit her or provide financial aid for alternative treatment. Regarding her own sanity, Bly said, "From the moment I entered the insane ward on the asylum, I made no attempt to keep up the assumed role of insanity. I talked and acted just as I do in ordinary life. Yet strange to say, the more sanely I talked and acted, the more crazy I was thought to be by all." Once inside, Bly found that the rumors about Blackwell's Island Asylum were true. Some women were admitted because they didn't have any money for therapeutic treatment, and many of them weren't even mentally ill. One patient needed financial help with an illness and was wrongly placed in a hospital's mental health ward and then transferred to the asylum. Another patient, Sarah Fishbaum, was put in the asylum by her husband because she was having an affair. Bly noted in her exposé, "The insane asylum on Blackwell's Island is a human rat trap. It is easy to get in, but once there, it is impossible to get out." Women were locked in, some for life, with no chances to escape. The asylum food was extremely bland and near inedible, sometimes even rotten. Some women refused to eat the food and went hungry, and others stole food from different plates. Each person was given a cup of pinkish liquid that they called tea, prunes, a piece of bread, and occasionally fish as a meal. Meanwhile, the asylum employees ate as much as they wanted because their food was cooked properly and had not expired. The patients were given baths once a week, the only time they would have access to soap. The tub was filled and women would take turns bathing without a change of water until the water in the tub got thick with dirt. All of the patients reused the same scratchy towels even if they were dirty or still wet. There were no blankets or adequate clothing, and some women went blue with cold. There were 1,600 to 1,700 women in 800 cells, which resulted in overcrowding because the cells were extremely small and only contained a single bed. The nurses were abusive. One woman started to cry that she wanted to go home because she was being treated badly, and the nurses slapped her and knocked her head. This made her more hysterical, so they dragged her into a closet so she could calm down, and she returned several hours later with bruises in the shape of fingers on her throat. Other patients got put in a freezer or received broomstick beatings if the nurses thought they weren't acting properly. Patients were injected with so much morphine and chloral that they became addicted and frenzied. A side effect of those drugs was needing to drink a lot of water, which the nurses denied them no matter how much the patients begged. Their throats got so dry that they were unable to speak. Bridget McGinnis, one of the patients Bly thought to be sane, experienced nurses pulling her hair and holding her underwater until she almost drowned. Nurses also kicked her and broke 2 of her ribs. McGinnis saw a girl brought into the asylum who fought against the nurses. She was beaten and thrown naked into ice-cold water. The next morning, the girl was found dead in her room, the doctor saying the cause was convulsions. The girl wasn't brought up again. The nurses succeeded in making the asylum appear to be a kindly managed place to the outside world. When patients had visitors, the nurses would dress the patient in clean clothes so the visitors didn't see what they really had to wear. Miss Group, a nurse in the asylum, said to Bly, "You don't need to expect any kindness here, for you won't get it." Bly spent 10 days in the asylum until she was rescued by her editor at the New York World newspaper. As written in her exposé, Bly said, "Sadly, I say farewell to all I knew as I passed them on my way to freedom and life, while they were left behind to a fate worse than death." By publishing 10 Days in a Madhouse, Bly made it known to all of New York City the inner workings of Blackwell's Island Asylum. Bly became an overnight sensation, and after reading her exposé, New Yorkers demanded reform. Her exposé for the New York World launched an investigation on how the asylum was run. Many people questioned how public officials had overlooked the mistreatment of the patients for so long. Though the head authorities of the asylum denied the accused treatment of the patients, ice baths were eliminated, rotten food was thrown out, and abusive nurses and attendants were fired. Some lawmakers opposed reform because it would be raising taxes, but the state of New York increased the budget of Department for Public Charities and Corrections by $1 million. 7 years after Bly's exposé, Blackwell's Island Asylum was shut down altogether. Much later, in 1980, the Civil Rights of Institutionalized Persons Act passed, which allowed the government to inspect mental health facilities and make sure the patients were in good care. Before Bly, there were other reformers at work. Dorothy Dix began her career in 1841 inspecting asylums for human rights violations. She testified before the Massachusetts state legislature about one particular asylum in Worcester, where patients were kept in cages, stalls, and pens. Her testimony improved the hospital, and Dix continued to authorize asylums and established hospitals where patients were treated with care. Elizabeth Packard founded the Anti-Insane Asylum Society after she was released from the Jacksonville Insane Asylum. Dr. John Galt introduced alternate methods to treat the mentally ill, and Francis Lieber helped to reform prisons and asylums. After Bly, newspapers across the country wanted more female undercover reporters, and adversarial journalism became much more popular and sought after. Bly elevated the role of women in society by opening up the field of journalism for women across the nation. Bly inspired both women and men to stand up for their rights and the rights of others and bring attention to social injustices. Bly was brave to spend 10 days in the asylum. It took even more courage to write and publish her exposé for all to read because it was going against the management of the asylum. It was extremely important for Bly to do this because the patients were helpless and did not have a voice. Bly was an upstander for the patients in the asylum and saved many women who couldn't save themselves. She inspires people today to follow in her footsteps.